What's going on, everyone? Welcome into MLS Digest. The 2026 season is going to be here sooner than you know it, and there have just been so many off-season moves in this short winter break before the 2026 season gets back underway in late February. And there's so much to go over. There's going to be so many new look teams, and of course, there has been a lot of drama when it's come to some of these trades and other types of player movement before we enter 2026. There have been plenty of different types of off-season moves in terms of the way they've been conducted. There's been a lot of cash for transactions, which is basically MLS's version of catching up to the rest of world football in terms of just making normal transfers through real money. And then there's also been a couple GAM related trades, and the biggest kind of source of this movement has been the fact that a lot of star and high profile players in MLS have had their contracts end. And so teams have just been picking away at free agents and just basically outmatching, the teams that had those players in terms of the contracts they've offered and so on. And so on paper, a lot of these teams look very exciting and intriguing, but of course we do this every year and we have to see how it all plays out. And that's what adds that level of interest in the league, of course. But on paper, once again, there have just been so many really eye-popping moves that make you excited to watch in 2026. Before we get into breaking down all the off-season news, please make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I would really appreciate your support if you've been enjoying the MLS content, and look forward to seeing more videos like this as we get into the next season and so on. Please consider that, and I would really appreciate that support joining this community as we get closer and closer to 500 subs. But before we get into the league-wide transfers and just breaking down some of the biggest moves in MLS, we can't really mention that or get to that without including and focusing on the team of the offseason for me and for many, whether it be controversial or, whatever you want to call it. Miami has been absolutely running laps around MLS this offseason, just making deals, getting deals done, getting these star players, whether that be in the league or out, and convincing them to come and join this project. Obviously, winning an MLS Cup and having Messi and co really helps your case, really makes things appealing for players on the fence. But they have been finding a way. They've, maybe whether you want to call it loopholes or not, as far as the roster structure, they have, at least on paper or what have you, seemingly been able to do this all legally. So we'll see if they have their own case of Manchester City or whatever down the road. But the league has to be taking notes on Miami because they are continuously in it to win it, and they are making they're not two-faced about that at all. So we have to go over these signings here, starting with Sergio Reguilon, who was a longtime Premier League player, Spurs, loan at Man United, and most recently at Brentford, and still pretty young. And he'll be joining after, of course, Jordi Alba retired alongside Busquets. And so he's just slotting right in there at left back, joining as a free agent. Wasn't able to really get a solidified spot in his loan spells. And, decided to join this project. And, of course, he's going to have a lot of friendly company here with Messi and co. And then we move on to David Ajala, a defensive mid. Probably one of the best in the league, was really holding it down for the Timbers, a Timbers side under Neville that is just really attack-minded, really transitional for the most part. They got a little bit more balanced this past season compared to 2 seasons ago, and we're still giving up goals. But I think Ayala, like, if he were not there, they would have been bottom of the league type of defense, or goals conceded type of numbers. But he's a really good workhorse. Has more tools than just playing defensively, of course. And Miami went on and got him $2 million, and that literally is just a like for like replacement with Busquets in a sense, as far as that positionally on the field. So just a really, really good get. It's from a separate conference, and it just makes them so much more stronger, so much more youthful, and a guy that can eat up so many minutes for you. Obviously, of course, as long as he's healthy. And then we go on to Dane St. Clair, the reigning goalkeeper of the year. He's been one of the best keepers in MLS for however long he's been here now, since entering the league, and willingly or willed Minnesota through each time they've gotten through the playoffs these past couple of seasons, round by round, up until they got knocked out, of course. But he's been just absolutely incredible in penalty shootouts. He's a great shot stopper, and just a very kind of confident, vocal goalkeeper that, of course, is still in prime years, very, very young. And they went on and got him as a free agent from Minnesota, and I believe Minnesota actually offered him a better contract. But St. Clair, of course, loved this project in Miami and just had to say yes to this, of course, and easily slots in, of course, as that starting goalkeeper. Miami's kind of rotated a couple of, in recent years, and now Drake Callender went to Minnesota, which is not really going to be one of the main players we discuss in this episode, but that's just another. It was kind of a swap, not technically, but in the background, that's kind of how it ended up working out. So Minnesota has some other problems going on in the background. Lost their coach, Eric Ramsey. And so, that kind of happened after St. Clair already decided, but Minnesota's been kind of getting stripped here. And, Dane St. Clair has been one of those headliners as far as a player leaving them. So, I mean, those two acquisitions, Ayala and St. Clair, are just unbelievably just on point from this Miami front office as far as addressing any concerns of this team, because we know this attack is going to get it done, but that side of the ball has always been, the question, because they've had old players there and just not really reliable as far as just those big moments in games where you need someone solid to make those plays to save you and have that talent. And those two guys definitely have the potential to continue doing that for Miami. And finally, of course, Herman Berterame, the striker who has kind of switched allegiances, started as a Argentinian national, and I believe now is a Mexican national, if I'm not mistaken, just due to probably just not being able to realistically make the national team, just due to the talent pool in Argentina. But regardless, I think technically, I guess if he first was Argentinian, is going to get along very, very well with, the many Argentinian players on Miami. And this is the big money deal. This has been reported for several weeks now, rumored in the makings. It hasn't really been made official by people on Miami side of things, but two of the most credited journalists between MLS and Liga MX have basically said this is a done deal for around $15 million, which will make Berterame Miami's final designated player. And Berterame has been kind of courted by a couple of other teams in MLS, including, I think, Cincinnati and Portland maybe. But for I think double-digit, millions as well, somewhere around 10 to 12 in the seasons past. But those deals haven't really been able to go through. I think he accepted one and it kind of fell through in the last stages and what have you. But Miami, to bring this guy, he is an absolute killer. He aerially dominant, very powerful, ball striker, I would say, and just someone who physically as well is going to really be able to put up numbers, I believe, in MLS, regardless of what team he would join. But when you pair that with the service of Messi and the other talented, wingers and midfielders on this team, I mean, this was the go-getter, especially because Luis Suarez, he's back for another one-year extension. But, of course, he can't be, getting the bulk of the minutes. He's going to be a guy that, of course, still offers you a lot and still offers you his normal, really good traits. But they need someone young, and this was the move. So, at the time of this recording, it hasn't technically been official, but be on the lookout for that. I don't think this one has a chance of falling through. It's just about whatever those final details have to be. But Miami will get this done. And, I mean, a couple of other moves as far as retaining Rodrigo de Paul after he was first on a loan. Now he's on a full contract. And then also retaining Tadeo Allende, who, of course, had the best playoff run by the numbers in MLS history, scoring in, I think it was every round, including the final. So he was a player that really just has gotten a hot form. And once again, I literally don't understand the financials of this, and as don't literally anyone in the MLS space almost, but Miami's just running laps around the rest of this league, and on paper, they should easily be favorites to go back-to-back, but we have a whole season to play. Despite Miami basically making the biggest headlines of the offseason, there have been many really exciting transfers and big money moves or high-profile player movement, whatever you want to call it, in the offseason. And this is not ordered in any specific way as far as the cash value of the move or what have you, but just going to go in order. And we start with Ty Baribo. He was the leading scorer for the Union last season, a Union team that really surprised everyone, that had a bunch of good strikers, right? With him, Mikhail Ura, Damiani, and then they picked up Iloski towards this back half of the season after San Diego, their loan. They didn't pick up his option or what have you. And there has been a lot of movement with the Union, but DC United, out of all teams, went out and spent $4 million on this guy, got him as their DP with Benteke leaving after basically wasting, what was it, 3 years of Benteke. And DC United's project is looking really, really better. They've signed Sean Johnson at goalkeeper from Toronto. They've signed Sean Nealis from Red Bulls in the back line. These are other really solid moves as far as just having a solid MLS core. Those two players are not ones we're really going to discuss at length, but once again, DC United is actually making moves. They have a bit more of a competent roster that doesn't look like a MLS Next or USL type of roster. And yeah, so this guy, from the moment he's really joined the league, has just been a threat, been a goal scorer, been consistent, is really energetic with pressing and all the like, is able to score in different ways. And I love this get from DC. It's just a different type of profile. They don't have to really, even though Benteke was amazing, they don't really have to center their play style around one player now. And this guy has just a couple more tools to kind of assist with the rest of this, because they do have a couple of playmakers in midfield. It's just always been about that back line, just the overall depth of that team is really, really lacking. So I really like that move from DC. And then we move on to Toronto, which went out and got Walker Zimmerman, one of the best center backs in MLS throughout his career. He's had some injury problems recently. He's definitely lost a step as far as maybe pace, but still, to get this guy as a free agent is just good business. It's good business, and Toronto has really just been needing a solid defensive player back there. Obviously, they have other issues to work out, but Nashville's gonna be missing him for sure. But Nashville has its own focuses, which we'll get to, and then we move on to the Chicago Fire, which got Robin Lod from Minnesota. That's another big move as far as a loss for Minnesota, because we talked about, of course, them losing Dane St. Clair. They've lost Eric Ramsey. Don't forget Oluwaseyi left for Villarreal, which he's been really enjoying life there, has really, made his case and really gotten used to La Liga already. But regardless, Minnesota is, maybe it's a topic for another video, but as we're on this topic, Minnesota is really, really going to look different in 2026, and one of probably the most negative turnarounds for a team in this winter period. So Robin Lod has been fantastic for Minnesota. He joins the Fire under Greg Berhalter, who really needs a 10 now because Brian Gutierrez left, a player we'll discuss later on, and kind of just slots right in there, kind of as a center midfielder, and it could more on the attacking side of things as well. But in that system, it's going to be interesting to see how he really fits in, because you also have Franco, who's going to be coming back after getting injured. But it's just a wonderful, an MLS vet in a sense, has the experience, has that talent and that touch, and can really be a goal scorer as well, pushing up behind that front line. So I really like that move for my hometown Fire. And as a free agent, that's just one of those players you had to get. So especially since it's a like-for-like transfer. And then moving on, one of the most interesting moves as far as it's kind of the same thing with San Diego. San Diego is not picking up these players' loans, options to buy after loans. Like I discussed with Iloski, they lost out after he was absolutely tearing it up for them. Yes, they still had a fantastic season without him, getting that number 1 seed, making it to the conference final. But regardless, there's just this weird trend with San Diego, because now with Luca De La Torre, who came from Celta Vigo, they had him on loan. They didn't pick up his option. And then Charlotte swung in and basically traded for him from San Diego to pick up his actual contract with Celta Vigo. So Charlotte's going to have him, and Charlotte already has a solid foundation, solid back line and midfield, but he just has that extra little bit of, kind of calmness and a bit of an attacking minded player in that midfield that is just really going to help the base level of this team. But that's always been a problem with Charlotte, on that other note, is that's always been their foundation, but they still have to go out and get, really just a far better front three. Let's just, call it how it is, I think. Because they also retained Pep Biel, finally, not just on loan after he had a much better second season than a first season, if that's what you want to call it, because he only joined the second half of that first season with Charlotte. And now he's going to be a full-time player, with a real contract that Charlotte's going to pick up. So things are looking definitely better for Charlotte, but I wouldn't just propel them much, much higher than they already have been, kind of just an annoying team in the East, essentially. And then, of course, to end this segment off, one of the biggest transfers, not even a transfer technically, just a free agent signing from Nashville, who lost Zimmerman, but I think they don't really mind too much because they got Christian Espinoza, the right winger, kind of attacking right mid, right-sided player, can play, attacking midfielder as well, from the Earthquakes, the longtime Earthquake player who has just poured in the goals and the assists, is a great corner set piece taker as well. And man, this is just incredible business, because I think also Nashville's offer wasn't really better than the Earthquakes, if I remember correctly, based on the rumors and all that. But the Earthquakes have just been in turmoil for quite some time now. Obviously, Bruce Arena joined, and he had definitely improved them from being one of the league's worst teams. But regardless, it's still a very young roster. The rest of the attackers that joined were mostly, MLS veterans that were towards the end of their best days. And yeah, I just don't know. I understand it from Espinosa's perspective, because Nashville's project and direction at the moment is just far superior, and he's immediately going to slot in and be able to really influence games with much higher level players around him. So it's just wonderful business. And on paper, with Surridge and Mukhtar and all the other midfielders that Nashville acquired basically before last season that have already found their stride and led them to that playoff appearance, I think things are looking really, really good. And he has the potential to be one of the front runners for MVP immediately. There's more than just that, though. There were some other more intra-league splashes as far as notable moves between, teams in the league. And the LA Galaxy and the LA teams in general also improving just slightly. I say slightly for LAFC, but very much so for the Galaxy. They've improved drastically, even though Ricky Puig is set to miss another full season, which is tragic news, because that is one of the most fun players to watch, because he has to get another surgery on that knee. The Galaxy still have a solid core, and they've went out and completely fixed that defensive situation, signing Glesnes from the Union and Justin Hawk from NYC. Glesnes has been an incredible player for the Union for many years. Almost willed that team to the MLS Cup against LAFC before they lost on penalties several years back. But LA actually used GAM for this, which was a bit surprising, because obviously the Union are very much sellers, very much academy oriented and cheap when it comes to deals. They are the ones getting, they're the ones stacking money and not players, and still finding a way. But for the Galaxy to use GAM for this, obviously it's a lot of GAM, but when you compare that to now the possibility of using real money, it seems like a steal to me. So he's going to slot right in there. You could have him and Garces, or, whoever you want to call it, Galaxy fans. Let me know down below who you see as that partnership. But also Hawk, who can play center back. He's kind of shifted into a center back role, essentially. But if need be, he was originally kind of a defensive mid anyway. So he is versatile. And in any case of injuries for the depth of this team, that's just a really good, reassuring thing to know and have for this team. So you're still going to have Peck, Paintsill, and Nascimento is slated to come back, I believe. Still a very young player and has potential, but it just makes the baseline of this team better. And I don't think they're going to be, of course, basically the bottom team in the West like they were last season right after winning MLS Cup. So this makes them at least a playoff contending team, because it just makes them more solid, allows less strain and stress on that front line to really carry and have to score like 3 goals a game to win games. And Greg Vanney is definitely going to be tinkering with the tactics there. But I think Fagundes also left, so the playmaking, the creative side of things, progressing the ball through midfield is still a question mark for the Galaxy. but you have really, really solid players between that or on the outside of that. And so that really ups their standing for me in the West. And then LAFC got Jacob Schaffelberg from Nashville. So while Nashville lost Schaffelberg and Zimmerman, they of course got Espinoza, but Schaffelberg is still an exciting winger. And it's just another good depth piece for LAFC on this attack. Of course, they still have Martinez, Son, Boanga, and then Yeboah, I think, left, right? So it's just another good piece to have, because obviously Boanga eats up minutes, basically starts every game. But I think Schaffelberg can be a little bit shifty as far as, where he positions himself lines up. So it's a good move, especially since they had to use Gam. And moving on, we have Lewis Morgan, the striker who played for Red Bulls for several seasons, but he's dealt with injuries. And this, I think, is one of the sleeper kind of moves for me this offseason. It's not a big money move. It's not a insanely high profile player, but this guy was a killer with the Red Bulls when he was healthy, and it's really just all about that potential. So it was a bit of a trade, including just not too much GAM and a super draft pick or something like that. And San Diego goes out and gets another good kind of striker that fits their needs, the profile of the kind of striker they want. And he can kind of slip in behind, and he's just, I just really like him as a profile, and it's all about that health, of course, for him to be able to actually produce and be worth this. It's not an insane investment as far as what they gave up for the trade, but regardless, it gives San Diego just another kind of piece there. So last but not least, Minnesota, once again, losing another key player this offseason in Joseph Rosales, kind of a left wing back who likes to push up high, cross the ball, and things of that nature. He's a creative player despite being on that back line. And Austin, out of all teams, went out and paid $1.5 million for him in cash. So Austin, which has been kind of hit or miss, mostly miss on a lot of their big money signings, especially in the attack, went out and got a left back here. But that's going to just make them a little bit more a little bit more harder to deal with because they've just been so straightforward to play against and just kind of just lacking talent when it comes to that ball progression. So I like this. I think it speaks to maybe a different direction that Austin is going. And I just hope to see more exciting soccer out of Austin. So I think this is a good move for that. Obviously, he's not an attacker or anything like that, but he can provide that type of service if he's actually played in his true position. And Austin and Estevez kind of adapt the tactics to suit their players the best that they can. There are also a couple of intriguing cases of players returning to MLS after different types of stints at clubs abroad. In this case, in Liga MX and the Brazilian Serie A. And, just differing cases of success and failure in a way. But these are the three main guys basically returning to MLS after not too long away. I would say Cade Cowell here, the longest away from MLS, like 2 seasons. But both of these other guys, Bogusz and Torres, only basically away for a season and a half max before coming back now ahead of the 2026 season. We'll start with Facundo Torres. Facundo Torres, I think, had the most success out of these three in his time abroad with Palmeiras, and wasn't a consistent starter, but still was kind of a rotation player, but still got really good opportunities. Got a decent amount of starts, but there's so many Masterfeed over there at Palmeiras that you really, really have to stand out. And he left Orlando for a record fee for the club, essentially. Um, you know, I'd say had a pretty good time in Brazil, and now returns to Austin for still, um, as far as Palmeiras is concerned, not losing too much money on him uh, with the return fee, because Austin just paid $9.5 million for this guy, and obviously we know they've paid for Vasquez, Uzuni, Bukhari, and they have mostly all been flops. So, um, I think this guy is kind of flop proof because he actually has touch, finesse, just a little bit of creative spark that Austin is really severely lacking, and just a player that can create things for himself. And it's going to be a player that Austin just really needs to link up with these other danger men that need the service and the attention off of them, so to speak, without just whipping in crosses and playing kind of boring soccer. So I like the move for Austin. I'm wishing Torres all the best because I think he's actually, I don't think this is really a case of a failure that his level is MLS or anything like that, but he could still move on somewhere else later. But I think, just enjoy him while he's here, and because he's a really, really exciting player and has a proven track record. So let's see if he can do in Austin what he did in Orlando. I think, if anything, Estevez's tactics and focus on defending, if he continues that route, is going to, hinder any player on this team. But I think Torres will still find a way to, rack up those goals and assists. But moving on to Mateusz Bogusz, who left LAFC for Cruz Azul and really just wasn't able to find his footing as far as, the statistics, the goals and assists. Of course, that's how we judge most players now. And, he was getting playing time, but, Cruz Azul didn't have the most success in the past two kind of campaigns. Regular season, sure. In the playoffs, always disappoint, and he wasn't really a big part of their plans. And although he was looking for that next step up, I don't think Mexico is a next step up anymore. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's kind of a lateral move at best. And at the time, I wasn't really happy about it that he moved there, but I think he's still so young that he can still do very well in MLS, right? Come back, find his confidence again, get more Polish national team call-ups, and potentially just do the work to move up to whatever better league you want to say. And so, yes, it's potentially like a year wasted in that sense, but once again, he's still so young. He's going to come into Houston now as a designated player, which puts way more pressure on his shoulders because he was, just a young kid behind the likes of so many stars in LA that, he was able to kind of just feed off that lack of attention, so to speak. But now, he's the guy in a sense on a Houston team that I don't think got really that much better outside of adding him. And I think they also lost Bassi. So, once again, I don't think this Houston team is going to be all that good, but he can still, light it up for them and be a consistent starter for sure. Obviously, you're DP, so that goes without saying. But still, $6.5 million paid by the Dynamo. That's a hefty sum. And while I don't want to say he's unproven in MLS, because he's proven in a sense, like he is a danger, but the system has to suit him, and he's also a bit he's a bit rotational in where you can put him. So that helps Houston because they, of course, have Ponce. But as far as the wingers go, they could be getting one or two back from injuries. and we'll see how it goes. But I like that he's back here instead of in Liga MX. And then the main guy, as far as U.S. is concerned, Cade Cowell, of course, homegrown for the Earthquakes, has gone to Chivas, played there for about 2 seasons or so, and is coming back now on a loan for the Red Bulls. And that's going to be an interesting case because the Red Bulls are kind of just a head case most years. And going to be playing with Forsberg, Choupo-Moting, and you can kind of also just shift him in a couple of positions and see what kind of formation works with him as far as the other person on this team. So it's a loan with an option to buy, I believe, after the 1 year. And once again, Cade Cowell is still so young, has so many years ahead of him, and just Liga MX, I just don't think is a league tactically that allows for these players to really find themselves, and there's just pressure on you from the jump to produce. And Chivas just in general has just had such a bad roster, in my opinion, talent wise, for the rest of Liga MX. Like, they've been competitive in a sense, but they've just never been out and out like a team you think is genuinely going to win a title or just bulldoze through the league in the regular season. So, he got a fair amount of goal contributions, but it just wasn't the right project. So, he's back in MLS. I like that for him. And let's hope for USA's sake, right, that he's someone that can continue to develop and just be a good player. And finally, we've got a few players who are unfortunately leaving MLS, and I think we have a few different cases as far as where they are in their careers, if this is the right move for them or not, and just how they were actually playing with their club in MLS, and why it might have been time to go or not. So we'll start with Brian Gutierrez, the homegrown and attacking midfielder for my Fire. Very sad to see him go. He goes to Chivas for a $5 million fee. Not bad at all from a business perspective. He was a homegrown, and he wants this challenge because he's a dual national and has now technically switched over to the Mexican national team. That's been a bit of a headline story in recent weeks because since he joined Chivas, now he's been officially kind of he hasn't made an official appearance for USA's national team, so he's decided to go to be a Mexican player, and of course his family has ties to Chivas, so that was part of why he chose them. So he's still very, very young, so I'm not gonna say I dislike this move like I dislike maybe a couple other players going to Liga MX, but once again, I don't think it's a career boosting move in a sense of it's going to propel you more than MLS could towards, say, Europe. I just don't. I just don't think that. And especially when it comes to the club you also go to, once again, I don't think it's too far off of a situation that Cade Cowell was in when he joined Chivas. I just don't think the Chivas squad has the support structure to actually have this guy showcase his talents. He's going to have to actually be put way more of a workload on him to get this team above what it currently is and where they want to be. I just don't think they have the support structure for him. So I, of course, wish him all the best, but, I think it's two sides of the coin. The Fire did good business. He wanted to go, and you have to respect that. But from a career perspective, it's just my opinion that it's just not going to really benefit him too much if his goal is to get to, a higher level, such as, outside a top 5 European league or what have you, or so on and so forth. So all the best to him. And then we move on to 2 Union players. And once again, the Union, kind of like Minnesota, just getting gutted this offseason. And it's going to be interesting to see how they can somehow recover once again, because they just seem to always do more with less. But They lost Kai Wagner, one of the best creative left backs in the entire league. $2 million paid to Birmingham. When the Union signed him, they said if an offer came from Europe, they would respect that and get it done. And it finally came. And Birmingham City, currently in the championship, currently, kind of an average team there, essentially. And that's a fantastic level for him, and who knows if they can get promoted or down the line. But he has already had an impact in his first couple of games, got I think an assist in his first appearance, and just wonderful for him to immediately just be a starting player in that team, not just a depth piece. So he's already showing his class that it translates over to a physical league like the championship. And then meanwhile, Mikael Ura, once again, another striker leaving the Union. He was a free agent, and Midtjylland from, I believe it's Denmark, if I'm not mistaken, signed him. And they are actually, I think, still top of the Europa League at the moment, or in that top 4 or 5 into the automatic, bye when it comes to the playoffs. So they've been a kind of a surprise story in the Europa League. He goes back to his home country, and it's a good move for him, bad move for the Union as far as I didn't think he was an insanely standout striker, but he was still a very serviceable option. And but if he was a free agent and he made his decision, there's really nothing you could do. And then we move on to Ali Ahmed for the Whitecaps. Part of that incredible run this past season, making it to the Cup final, to the Champions Cup final, and all these milestones that he hit along the way with the Whitecaps as a group. And Norwich City in the championship, who was really, really flirting with relegation throughout this first half of the championship season. They paid $2 million for him. He's a left winger, and can kind of really take on his players one-on-one a bit, and of course it need to be creative in a league like the championship if you want to be successful and kind of run through that physicality on these back lines. And once again, another MLS player that is immediately having success in the championship as well. He's already had, I think, 2 goals and 1 assist in his first 3 games with Norwich, who I think at the moment now, through these past several results and maybe a few before that as well, including, are now out of the relegation zone, and they've just been flying. So a Norwich side that is currently on pace or expected to lose Josh Sargent because he's been linked with Toronto, but that's only been a rumor so far, nothing really official, so I haven't really talked about that too much in the video. But a Norwich side that still is set to lose Josh Sargent in some way because he's basically they've just basically come to a falling out, and they've put him on the academy kind of he's been training with the academy or the reserves or what have you, instead of the normal team. So he's going to be leaving regardless. Can an MLS team capitalize? I don't know, depending on the fee, but his fee might go down because of everything that's been happening. They might just want to get rid of him. So who knows if that also might be in the works. But once again, regardless, a fantastic way for Ahmed to get life started in the championship. So just looks good on MLS, of course. And then finally, I think with Osman Bukhari, this is one of those cases where it just didn't pan out. And it's incredible to me that Austin was able to sell this guy for $6.5 million to Wisła Łódź in the Polish Ekstraklasa, which is a league record fee for the Ekstraklasa. And so, I mean, he was a flop. Let's not get, mince words, but I don't think it was fully on him. I just think Austin's system, the past few coaches, just really just did not have good tactics. They did not allow any of their attacking players to flourish. But also, I would say he also had opportunities and didn't really, show that he was a standout player, in my opinion, a DP level player. And so it was just time for it to come to an end. Austin's, of course, making a couple of moves in this offseason, additional to supplement the roster, and it's just good business by Austin. I don't know how they pulled it off, honestly, because this guy was a guy for Red Star and Ghana that, when he was a bit younger, was looking very, very promising, and I understand what Austin saw in him, but he just didn't work out. And so I don't really have too many negative things to say as far as the business side of this deal, but it's just hard to fully rate any Austin player because of what the team has been, what the structure has been in the past couple of seasons. It's hard to really put a finger on how much of it is on Bukhari, right? And if it's just him, if he was struggling, if he's just not that good, I don't know, or the other side of it. So I think it's good for all parties, and just one of those cases where, yes, you don't want to see players leaving MLS, but if they're getting the money, why not? And try to reload and make right of your wrongs, because Austin has had a lot of bad DP deals. We're only less than a month away from the 2026 MLS season, and there have just been so many moves. So please let me know down below in the comments what your favorite ones have been, the most surprising ones, and if you support a club in MLS, what you think still needs to be done as far as supplementing the roster, and what you would just like to see happen before the season starts. Please make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel, guys, and I'll catch you all in the next video.